Behind every success story, there is a long line of triumphs and defeats that remain hidden from others. These stories get condensed into journeys that minimize the struggle and wrap up with a happy ending. But we know that's not how life works. That's where From the Ashes with Mark Azoulay comes in. On today's show, you'll hear honest conversations about the challenges that Mark's guest faced and how they overcame adversity. Now, here is your host, Mark Azoulay.
Welcome back to another episode of From the Ashes. I'm here with Christina Dixon. Christina, you were on, I was looking this up, you were all the way back on episode 22, which was My Body Hates Me, where you talked about your autoimmune disorder and all that. And that was one of our most popular episodes. So I'm really happy to have you back on to talk about a topic that is near and dear to both of our hearts, dating in your 30s. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Yes, it's such a pleasure to talk about dating, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of great stories there. And I think it's something that's really hard for people in their 30s to do. It certainly was for me. And I know in your practice that, you correct me, I don't know, either you run or you're thinking about running like dating support groups. Is that correct?
Right. I was actually hoping to run a group. And similar to what you were talking about, there was a lot of difficulties, I think, in acknowledging, hey, I'm in my 30s and I'm dating, or even maybe older than that. And I encountered a lot of shame. People were embarrassed to admit that they were single or felt like it was something wrong with them. So actually, the group never got running because it was so hard to get people to really congeal and say, yeah, I'm going to do this and I'm going to attend a group about this.
That's so, it makes a lot of sense, right? It's like people talk about it and they think about it, but when it comes to joining a group and like saying in front of other people, even though, I don't know, maybe that's a good place to meet people, right? It's a group of other single people that want to talk about dating.
Yeah. And I was trying to be clear too. I wasn't wanting this to be a matchmaking service or having people meet up, but yeah, you'd think that there would be some shared experience. I know for me, usually when I was single, it was nobody else that I knew was single. Everybody that I knew was like, oh, I'd match you up with somebody, but gosh, everybody I know is partnered. So it didn't seem like there was a community for me to be able to talk about it and get some support and just have someone say, yeah, I know how hard this is. It's a shit show sometimes.
Yeah, 100%. And I find that true when I was going through it in my friend group is that, yeah, everyone seemed to be partnered in a way, or were just like resigned to being single and just did not want to talk about it at all.
Yeah. And that was where I was for a long period of time, was I had a pretty painful breakup in my early 30s. And just kind of swore off the dating scene. I was, I'm fine being single. I'm an independent woman. I can do this. I don't need somebody. And I even remember having a conversation with my cousin who's younger than me. And he was like, you seem pretty solid on like, you're not wanting to be in a relationship. And basically I was thinking, screw it. Who needs that kind of hassle? So I really went in that opposite direction of, I am not wanting to do this at all. And I'm just going to be as single for as long as possible. And I know a number of people who've gone through similar kind of painful breakups and did the opposite approach. I'm basically going to date everybody I can see, be with 4 or 5 people in 1 week or whatever. And so it was really interesting also to have that difference in approach and some shame or judgment or attack of one person doing it wrong and the other person having the right answer.
Yeah. Did you feel some of that shame or judgment when you were in that place?
I think I did, and I wasn't really open to acknowledging it. Again, I was embracing that solid independence of this is what I want. And I was so full of that I wasn't really entertaining the idea of there was a part of me that wanted something different. And it was hard to put myself out there and be vulnerable again and date and try to open myself up to the joys of it, but also the real slug of going out on dates with people, meeting new people, and having it not work.
I know, there's so much rejection.
And as someone who I identify as introverted, takes a lot of energy for me to get out sometimes to meet up with people. Meeting and doing that small talk of answering, it feels like the same questions over and over and not having it go anywhere was just brutal.
Yeah, I know. Same thing. It's like investing in people, having the same first date 100 times.
Right.
It's tough. And it's just like, Did you use dating apps? You did, right?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Even just the dating app process of just having to, I know it's different for men and women. From the male side, it's often dealing with a ton of rejection, right? We just send out a million messages and get like, I think the latest Hinge stats or Tinder stats, it's like less than 2% back. It's like
Wow.
unbelievably low for the average user. And then women, my understanding is that it's the opposite problem, is that you guys get flooded with all kinds of trash, and it's more about sifting through that and finding someone that's worthwhile.
Right. And then so I think that happens a lot. And then I think there's also a comparison in at least my experience of how much trash is somebody else going through than I'm going through because they're a better catch online. They're getting more people reaching out to them, even though it's not a lot of quality like you're talking about. But then, what happens when you're talking to somebody and then they ghost you, or you're talking to somebody and then they want to immediately move from the app to text or personal conversation or getting to meet in person. And then other people, you're talking to for weeks and they're never taking that approach. So it is really that's what my experience was a lot of sifting and a lot of figuring out what I really wanted and how to find someone that had some kind of similar interest.
Yeah, so tell me about that. I think it would be helpful to organize the episode around the different phases. All right, so let's start at the beginning, right? When you decided to get back into the dating world and get on an app, what was that like for you?
It was, I had many rounds of doing that. I would get on an app for maybe a month or two, feel like it was absolutely not working and ditch. So I think the first was almost a contemplative stage of I really want to do this and I really want to invest in it, even if it's not going to create immediate results. You hear the story of someone whose first match was their future partner and spouse, and that was not my experience. So it honestly took a lot of therapy, and it took a lot of understanding, like we're talking about, of the sifting through in order to be able to even write a profile, stick on it for a few months and decide my approach. But then it was immediately, I think the first few people that contacted me, I was convinced they were going to be the love of my life and this was going to make it so easy.
Oh, yeah.
So I think I had to ride through some of those waves of the real excitement, the real unrealistic expectations, and to go through a number of, I think, again, another for women, some safety concerns. There are some people that I was having some reactions to that I wasn't really in tune with, that they were maybe trying to advance things too quickly. I know there was one person that I was on a video call with, and this is silly, but most of the time you kind of organize we'll do a video call this afternoon or at this specific time. And this person just called me up randomly. And I overlooked it in the way of like, oh yeah, that's what people used to do. We used to just call spontaneously. And then he didn't have a shirt on as we were talking, and he was just wandering through his house. And initially I had a reaction of like, I think my gut was telling me something is a bit off with this, but I couldn't identify exactly what was off. So I just was continuing the conversation. And then he said, let's meet up. And I'm like, yeah, sure. And then I processed it later with some people and they're like, yeah, don't you think that one thing was weird or that other thing was weird? And really got some support on just because someone is interested or just because someone is encouraging you to move faster doesn't mean you have to.
Yeah, I think that's great advice.
So there were a lot, I think, of the pre-workup of, recognizing, again, my sort of safety concerns, recognizing my ups and downs emotionally through this, and having some of those disappointments of I talked to someone for a few days and now I got ghosted. Or I went out on that first date and just didn't really enjoy myself. So I think those were kind of the first phases of getting onto the app and just really having I overheard a conversation once of two strangers when I was on a walk. And this woman said, I've now kind of found the rhythm of how these dating apps work. And I feel like I've got a better idea of how to weed people out faster. And I think it does take some practice to get there.
I think that's true. And what I'm hearing is like a real disillusionment. This idea of like, oh, it's so easy. This app is going to make everything easier. We're going to just be able to match like all these algorithms and you can actually like scope somebody out or Google them. But I found that it makes it harder in a lot of ways.
Right. I think that we're sold on that idea of this is easy. And, some of them promote, like you said, the algorithms and the success rates. But if you do the math, they're incredibly low for the numbers of people that are actually participating in the app. So yeah, expectation setting and just building up that tolerance of this may not happen quickly. And part of the reason that I was reluctant to join apps to begin with was that I kept saying, I want to do this old school. I think I present better in person. I think I have a better way of gauging somebody in person. And I was convinced that I was going to crack the code on how we can actually meet in person. But I was just finding that I couldn't figure out exactly what interests I had that other people would be sharing that would encourage that kind of conversation.
Yeah, I think that's another really important point, is that the in-person meetups don't really happen. I think we're of similar age. So I don't know what it was like, in like the Gen X or Boomer generation, but my sense is that even at places where people used to meet up, like bars or clubs, people are there with their friends. They're not really interested. I think our generation has, I think for the worse, a lot of like stranger danger ideas. So we're not really open to just casually talking in other environments. There's not a lot of, at least I found, not a lot of avenues to meet people that were on the same level as far as being open to dating and forming a relationship.
Right. And I think one of the most important things about forming a relationship is that familiarity, that ability to maybe strike up conversations over time, see each other over a stretch. So that's why I think dating in maybe high school years or college years is easier. That's why a number of people happen to meet someone at their workplace. That was where my relationship in my 30s happened, was we were both working at a hospital. And so we were able to see each other regularly, strike up some conversation, and be able to get to know each other. We don't have a lot of those spaces anymore.
Totally. Yeah. So I'll share a little bit of my story. I think it would be kind of cool if we just weave back and forth as we go through these phases. So I had come off just a lot of awful relationships, right? Where I would date people that were not healthy for me, that were kind of repeating old traumas and patterns, et cetera, et cetera. I've talked about it, a decent amount on the podcast. And I worked with my therapist, Rick Tivers, who was actually on last week. And he said, hey, do a year of being alone and a year of celibacy, right? Yeah. So not just being single, but not having sex at all, not even like worrying about it. And that was, intense in the beginning for sure, because being in a relationship was a way that at that time was really organizing for me. I got a lot of value from the women in my life, for better or for worse, sometimes a lot for worse. I merged a lot, and I really felt like I needed a woman to validate me. And I needed sex, quite frankly, right, to validate me and to feel like alive and vital and cool, right, desirable. So going through that, I really had to learn how to be alone.
And as we were talking about before, too, there's a lot of our peers are in relationships, too. So I think there's a joining quality of that, or a normalizing quality that gives us value, too.
Absolutely. Yeah. A lot of my friends were in relationships, or like I say, I didn't seem to be trying, or we're on the dating thing. A lot of guys are, we're all doing it. We're kind of doing the sometimes very adolescent thing of like sharing photos or like talking strategy. And I wasn't a part of that. And I had to learn how to just be on my own and not even to look. And I had to get a real slice of humble pie of being like, hey, my picker, right? The thing that my attraction compass is horribly miscalculated. That the people that I am like truly physically, sexually, emotionally attracted to are going to be the same person. So I was in like a ton of relationships, but I dated the same person over and over and over again. And I was like, I need to find somebody new in order to date here. So did that year. Okay.
How did your therapist get your buy-in on doing that for a year? That I think would be a hard one for a lot of people to agree to.
It was just a case of just, again, dating that same person over and over again and really getting hurt in the same way over and over and over again. And I really trust my therapist, and he was like, just do it, and I was like, you're right. I need to recalibrate. I need to do some deep emotional work. I need to figure out like what's really going on here, because the worst thing of being unsuccessful with these women would have been being successful with them.
Sure.
Because that would have been the rest of my life.
Yeah.
I would have been stuck in that same relationship.
And like you said, reliving those traumas and just not being happy ultimately.
Right. Like losing myself, doing the nice guy thing, like living in resentment. All the stuff. Like I don't want to go there. So I get on the apps, and unfortunately it was like right before COVID hit. So I was trying to do this during COVID. And like you were saying, most people meet in the place of work. I work in private practice in my own house. So like I don't meet anybody. And of course I don't date my clients, right? That's super inappropriate. So like I literally do not meet anybody most of my time. So I use the apps as an option to try to get out there. And it was tough. It was tough building a profile, being like, how do I best represent myself? I don't really take photos in my life. I don't really take selfies. So I'm like, where do I get photos of me? Really like practical stuff. Yeah. It was my first time really doing apps because all the other people I had met in like professional community for the most part. But this was like, okay, I got to do it on the internet now. And it was just like, God, so many like dark, lonely nights of just sending out messages and getting nothing back. I mean, I'm a very regimented person. So I was like, all right, I'm going to do like 30 minutes every single day. And sometimes I did that. Sometimes it became like multiple hours.
Right.
But I remember taking breaks because I would tell Rick, I was like, look, these apps are making me more lonely. Like they're actually hurting me and they're hurting my self-esteem. And I would have to take breaks to be like, this is tough, and I would get to a place where, quite frankly, I was down on myself or I was mad at women, like feel like, why aren't you messaging me back? Right. Like, is this really where I'm worth? Is this like my score? Like, is this the matches I'm getting? Like with this algorithm, like, it was like, it got dark some of those nights for sure.
I think a lot of people have experienced that kind of situation. I know I had a similar like frustrations or just throwing in the towel of I don't want to do this anymore and forget this. And so, those are the ebbs and flows that unfortunately come with the dating apps.
Yeah, they are a weird thing that our culture is doing. And I remember, when I was in college and grad school, they used to be kind of fringe, but now they're just the norm. I mean, this is like the way that it works now. So we're going to move into our break here. When we come back, we will talk about kind of those first couple dates, like what's it like in the initial screening process, and then we'll kind of build out our story from there. So,
all right.
Thanks, listeners, for tuning in, and we'll catch you on the other side of the break.
Find out what's happening on the Voice America Talk Radio Network by keeping up with us on Twitter. You can find us at Voice America TRN.
In Mark's work with high performers and business owners, it is becoming increasingly clear to him that their biggest obstacle to success is themselves. They are experts in their field, but are dragged down by their anxiety, poor time management, inability to focus, or self-sabotage. His role is to help you overcome these emotional and organizational issues so that you can truly excel in your business and your personal life. One of the most common hurdles that he sees is perfectionism, a crippling anxiety around performance. It's a fear of not being good enough, being publicly embarrassed, or of disappointing others. These fears paralyze brilliant people and bring them to their knees. This course will help you to break free from this mental prison and have more agency in your world. In this online course, we will break down the prison of perfectionism so that you can break out of it. For more information and to sign up, visit mark-azulay.teachable.com. That's Mark, MARC-Azulay, AZOULAY.teachable.com.
Find out what's happening on the Voice America Talk Radio Network by keeping up with us on Twitter. You can find us at Voice America TRN.
Are you disenchanted by the saccharine-laced stories that you were told when you were younger? Behind every success, there is a hidden journey filled with triumph and defeat. On From the Ashes with Mark Azulay, you'll hear about the challenges that our guests had to overcome to become the successful people that they are today. Listen live every Friday at 11 a.m. Pacific Time and 2 p.m. Eastern Time on the Voice America Empowerment Channel. You are listening to From the Ashes with Mark Azulay. To reach the show today, please call 1-888-346-9141. That's 1-888-346-9141. or send an email to podcast@mark-azoulay.com. Now, back to From the Ashes.
Okay, welcome back to From the Ashes, and we're just talking about dating, man. Dating in your 30s. It is really intense. So we talked about our initial kind of getting on the apps, doing the initial filter, the initial search. What were some of those first date experiences like for you, Christina?
They were a range of experiences. There were a few people that I met up with that could just immediately tell this is not someone that I'm interested in. And then you have to figure out how to spend an hour or two, whether it's, a coffee or a lunch or something, of how do I maintain this conversation with somebody that I am just not really feeling. And then I think there's also the, interesting, how do you end that date? Because you may have a mutual, yeah, this was nice, kind of, blanket statement, but you sometimes have those, I want to give you a hug, or I really enjoyed this. Look forward to talking to you again. Can I call you? And trying to gently maybe explain that you're not interested, or that you don't want that phone call, or feeling like you're giving your number and then having that person, you're having to avoid them or whatnot. So a few awkward endings.
Yeah. Tell me about the rejection piece, because that was something that I really had to learn and helped me get over a lot of my nice guy tendencies, was learning how to reject people. Mm-hmm. What was that like for you?
Kind of similar, that I certainly didn't want to be hurtful or mean, but I also didn't want to then feel like I was almost being harassed by my own phone, that someone is texting or calling and I'm not interested. It personally was a growing opportunity again for me to be having those conversations in person. I was more inclined to, sure, here's my number. And then, a few days later of not really responding too much, giving some blanket, things are really busy. I'm not really up for this right now kind of response. So having that, this was nice, but I don't see us meeting again, was much more difficult for me.
Yeah, totally. Right. Like I had to do the same thing, as I tried to let people down easy. Is this true? I'm trying to think if this is true or not. I think it's true. I think I was rejecting more than I was rejected.
Okay.
But that was something that I had to learn how to do, because I would, do the same thing of not quite feeling it, or just kind of ghost. And I would feel bad after that, because even though I didn't gel with the person, I didn't think they were a bad person. I just thought it wasn't a good fit for us. So I would feel just bad about ghosting people.
Well, and like you were talking about before too, you would have those dark moments of my worth and all that. I didn't want to put that onto somebody else, possibly by ghosting and then having them say, what the hell? I did have a first date where the person said, I'm really enjoying this. I very much want to see you again. And somehow it was kind of like I made a statement of, I'm going to be here until, I forget how I said it, but something along the lines of, I'm interested, I'm here. And he was saying the same thing. And I never heard from him again.
Yeah.
And it was just so confusing, because I'm recalling the date and I'm like, okay, you said to me first that you wanted to get together again. You really enjoyed this. You were afraid that I was going to disappear. I told you I wasn't. And now I'm not hearing from you.
100%.
So, yeah. I think there's just a lot of what the hell? And am I reading this so wrong? And kind of recalling again those moments of, no, he said this, and what might be happening behind the scenes that I don't know about.
Yeah. I mean, so much of it, I think it's that nice guy or nice gal situation, right? I until this experience, I truly did not know how to reject people directly. Mm-hmm. I can say that honestly. In my life, I didn't really have to deal with that a lot. I don't have to fire people. I didn't really have to push away a lot of people. I was generally very nice and just kind of amicable with a lot of people in my life, sometimes for better, sometimes for worse. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know how to reject people. And I was that guy so many times in the early stages of just being like, oh yeah, this is great. I can't wait to see you, right? This is fantastic. Because I was just trying to be nice, I guess. But on the inside, I'm like, no. I never wanted, this sucked. I was looking at the watch the whole time,
mm-hmm.
But I just physically and emotionally could not do that, because I didn't want to hurt somebody.
Yeah. And it's so interesting how this process often seems like it hurts people regardless. You might hurt mm-hmm. people by saying, I'm not so interested. You might hurt people by saying, I'd like to give you a call and then, not. So yeah, it just seems like this, like we were talking about, this system is kind of so flawed with the culture of online dating.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I think it is more, this is what I came to. It helped motivated me. So listener, if you're in this place, it hurt people more to lead them on. That was by and large way, way worse. Or to give them unclear signals, which is I think what you were talking about. Right.
And that's what I ended up learning too, is that I disliked it so much that it helped me move past that nice guy kind of encounter of, no, I'm going to find at least some way that feels authentic to me to say I'm not going to be meeting up again. Because I didn't like how it felt to be wondering and waiting.
Yeah.
Do you have a bad first date story?
Oh, so many. So many bad first dates. I mean, God, what do I even share here? I mean, I remember going on one in particular where this person was just so anxious. Mm-hmm. It was difficult for me to be around. Right. We just got coffee and she like spilled coffee on herself. She like tripped and fell. Like it was like romantic comedy type situation. She like couldn't stop fidgeting, like eyes darting around everywhere, like did never stop talking. And I just like went into the space with her, and I felt it, right? Because that kind of stuff is just very contagious. Mm-hmm. So I'm just sitting there, and I'm talking fast, and it's just like this two weird like lightning bolts connecting. That at the end I was like, I need to get out of here. I didn't need to like run away because it was way too extreme and intense right off the bat.
And I feel like in that experience too, I kind of identified different categories of bad first dates. It was the anxious or, too strung, high strung kind of person. You have the oversharer, I think, the one that likes to tell you all of their problems or all of their family dysfunction. I think you've got the person that you, at least personally, find really boring.
Mm-hmm. I had a lot of those.
Right. A lot of awkward spaces or, silences, a lot of difficulty finding something to talk about. And then I didn't have this too terribly much, but I know a lot of people talk about the almost bait and switch, that you feel like there's a big description about the person that was not, the picture wasn't totally accurate, or it was from 10 years ago, or I thought they were like this and they ended up being very different.
Yeah. A lot of those. A lot of those too, right? And I don't know if there's like a gender difference on that, but yeah, meeting up with someone and being like, you don't look like your picture at all, and I think for men and women, attractiveness is important, right? Physical compatibility is important. So, and those people, actually the bait and switch, those were the hardest to reject because I had this thing again, and it's like nice guy thing of like, I won't reject someone because of their looks. Like, what if there's something more there? And, I'm a therapist, so it's like, I obviously value personality and connection and intimacy. It's not like I'm in like perfect shape either, right? So I just have all these ways of like rationalizing what was going on, but it was like, man, if I can't see myself be physically attracted to this person, I don't know where we go from there, especially if they're also boring on top of that. Like, I can't even be friends.
Well, it's interesting that you had struggles with that, because I think for me it was clear of what I looked at it as a sense of trust. To me, it felt like a lie on the first date or before we even met each other. And if you're lying about something before I even know you, it feels like I wasn't able to take anything for face value and really have confidence in, well, you say your birthday is this. Is that really your birthday? Or you say you're from this hometown. Is that really true? So for me, I think it was the bait and switches were a little bit easier of, no, that's a clear cut. I don't know that I'm going to be able to trust you at your word from now on.
So it's like a very clear safety concern. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense.
I think the boring ones were probably the hardest for me. Because how do you just put into words like, I thought this was dull? And I actually did have, it was a second date with somebody that we went to a park and we were talking. And I think in the moment said, does it seem a little weird to you that we have so many silences and we've just met each other? And he's like, no, I think it's great. I haven't even noticed the silences. I'm like, okay. So I'm sitting here counting down the seconds of here we go again. We're not talking and you haven't even noticed it.
Yeah. You're like, that's a red flag. He doesn't even see that as an issue.
Right. And yeah, I love silences in other relationships, but when I first met you and we don't have anything to really talk about, that's usually the period of time where you can't shut up.
Mm-hmm. Right. You're getting to know each other and figure it out. Did you have any like bad reactions to rejections?
I can't recall any.
Okay.
I think I can think of some friends that have had some stronger reactions to those kind of exchanges. The person that they were talking to had a strong reaction, but I don't think I had any. Did you?
Oh, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I cracked with my therapist. I tried to have like a direct rejection, kind of like copy and paste, right? That wasn't like pointed, but was very clear. And it said something along, I wish I could pull it up. Something along the lines of like, hey, I'm not really feeling a connection with you. It was great having that first date, but I don't think we're a good match for each other. Like, best of luck out there, right? Something that's like, vague. It doesn't say like, oh, you were boring, or like, I don't think you're attractive, right? That's like too mean.
Right.
But it was like, I don't want to meet again. And it's not going to work. By and large, that worked. People, most women on the apps that I was dating were like, hey, thanks for letting me know. Some said, hey, I felt similarly. And I was like, great. That was fine. I had no problem getting counter rejected, right? That was like, okay, good. We're on the same page.
Exactly.
No worries, right? But there were some that were like, what exactly is wrong with me, right?
Oh, wow.
Like either they fell into shame or they got mad or something, right? Or they're like trying to ask for feedback. I got some of those. I got being a therapist. I got like, if you're a therapist and you reject people this quickly, how could you ever do your job? Right? Like, how could you be so judgmental, right? I mean, I got like a fair amount of like, I feel hurt. I'm going to like shame you back,
And speaking of it, I think I did get a few of the aggressive kind of responses back, not necessarily about me being a therapist, which I find humorous that they were getting on you about that.
It's funny.
But, yeah. But I think just the general, like, aggressive, like you said, how can you tell that so quickly? Something along those lines. That it is interesting how people respond to those kind of things, that you were not being mean at all. You weren't being hateful. It was just a recognition of, this isn't what I'm feeling right now. But I think because so many of us have our worth attached to our relationship status or attached to what somebody thinks about us, it can be taken really personally.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, if I'm looking in retrospect, on the first date, I try to go full charisma. I try to give him the best shot. Like I'm a little physical, right? Like maybe a kiss at the end, but like, arm over the shoulder, touching. Like I try to give everybody a shot from the beginning. Mm-hmm. And then to have that like revoked, I think for some people, to give them some grace there's like a whiplash effect, of like, whoa, like if I felt all this, why is it now a rejection?
Mm-hmm. You do seem like the kind of person that I had the most trouble with on those first dates of, wait, I'm getting this message and it doesn't make sense.
For sure. Yeah. Cause I mean, it's like micro testing. I don't know. I don't know if that's right or wrong, but I would test to see like, hey, do they think I'm funny? How do they respond to this story? Like, can they banter back and forth? Like, what's our physical chemistry like? Like in all those ways, I was testing that by putting myself out there. And then when it wasn't reciprocated, I'm like, okay, cool. Like I get really clear about what I was looking for.
Yeah. And it's such a small piece of time, really, again, because we don't have those opportunities to get a sense of someone in a natural environment, whether it's a community event that we're doing or a friend of a friend. But it feels like those first date or two are really high stakes. And I imagine a lot of people will go on those first few dates and then it's make it or break it. It's either we're going to try to make this a relationship or be serious in some way, or see you later, hit the curb and moving on to the next profile.
Right. There's such like a cycling process. So I'm curious, what were you screening for in those first couple dates?
Oh gosh.
Like, were you aware of it or was it more of like a vibe?
I think probably a vibe. But I do think it was a bit of having some similar values or outlooks, just in the world in general. I had a few conversations with people about how politics was coming up so quickly during dating, because I was dating again in 2020, 2021. And so with the racial profiling and stands that were taken around the country with the president and the politics and all that, it was coming up incredibly quickly. And a lot of people were saying, if you're not on my page, see ya. So I think values were coming up, and then a vibe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's great. I mean, yes, politics, that was a red flag for me. Is if we started arguing on the first date, I was like, ugh. There's fun banter, which I really do enjoy. And then there's disagreement, othering, attack. That was whoa, this is really intense. And of course, it's 2020 and it was COVID, but it's holy shit. I was trying to screen for people that were not who I dated before. Kind of leave it at that. But looking more for quite frankly, motherly qualities, right? Kindness, nurturing, connection with others, compassion, empathy, kind of that vibe, which was very different than the people that I dated before.
Well said.
Yeah, so we're going to move to our next commercial break here. When we get back, we'll talk about kind of getting into a relationship and making it a little bit more serious.
Find out what's happening on the Voice America Talk Radio Network by keeping up with us on Twitter. You can find us at Voice America TRN.
In Mark's work with high performers and business owners, it is becoming increasingly clear to him that their biggest obstacle to success is themselves. They are experts in their field, but are dragged down by their anxiety, poor time management, inability to focus, or self-sabotage. His role is to help you overcome these emotional and organizational issues so that you can truly excel in your business and your personal life. One of the most common hurdles that he sees is perfectionism, a crippling anxiety around performance. It's a fear of not being good enough, being publicly embarrassed, or of disappointing others. These fears paralyze brilliant people and bring them to their knees. This course will help you to break free from this mental prison and have more agency in your world. In this online course, we will break down the prison of perfectionism so that you can break out of it. For more information and to sign up, visit mark-azulay.teachable.com. That's Mark, MARC-azulay, AZOULAY.teachable.com.
Find out what's happening on the Voice America Talk Radio Network by keeping up with us on Twitter. You can find us at Voice America TRN.
Are you disenchanted by the saccharine-laced stories that you were told when you were younger? Behind every success, there is a hidden journey filled with triumph and defeat. On From the Ashes with Mark Azulay, you'll hear about the challenges that our guests had to overcome to become the successful people that they are today. Listen live every Friday at 11 a.m. Pacific Time and 2 p.m. Eastern Time on the Voice America Empowerment Channel. You are listening to From the Ashes with Mark Azulay. To reach the show today, please call 1-888-346-9141. That's 1-888-346-9141. Or send an email to podcast@mark-azulay.com. Now, back to From the Ashes.
Welcome back to From the Ashes. We're talking about dating in your 30s, and now we're on that next phase, right? We're on the having a relationship phase, right? You went through the screen, you went through some awkward first dates, finally something happens, okay, we're going to do this. So Christina, we talked over the break where it sounds like you really just had one relationship that then became a more long-term relationship. Is that true?
Right. I was pretty clear as we were talking about what was I screening for. I think I was pretty clear on internally the things that were going to work and not. So after a few first dates, if things weren't gelling, I wasn't really interested in trying it out for a few months to see. So yes, I had a lot of one and dones until I met someone that I was really interested in spending more time with. And that turned into a longer term relationship. But it sounds like you had a few of the few months.
Yeah, that's your way sounds really nice. Mine was like I mean, honestly, if I'm being honest in this podcast, the first couple ones were me being a nice guy and not knowing how to reject people.
Sure.
And like the fucking train, like leaving the station. And I was like, well, I guess we're hanging out now, you know? And every time I didn't reject them, it just got harder
Sure.
because there was like something more real, I guess, on their end, right? I mean, on my end too, but something more real that was happening. But yeah, I dated like, I want to say 4 or 5 people for like 2 or 3 months. Pretty much through the whole pandemic, there was always like something that was happening. I was monogamous during that. Like I would get off the apps, but I was in these like short-term relationships.
And did all of them feel like the train had left the station, or were there some that you thought this has potential?
There were some where I was like, this has potential, until like something happened. And I was like, oh my God, this is awful, right? So like the one before the woman who I'm dating now, it was like, it was pretty cool, right? Like I thought it was pretty cool. I don't know how much to say in detail. Well, she probably doesn't listen to this, but she was like a romance writer, which was like kind of a cool job. She like was into Marvel, which I'm into. She was like very like fun and funny, very like excited about the world. And like in dates, that was like really fun. It was fun to like go out in the world and explore together.
Sure.
Right. However, when it came to getting a little bit closer and conflict resolution, it was awful. Like she would, every time we would have like a conflict, I'd bring something up, she would just get like really hurt and then really mad. And it just became about like how I was doing stuff that her old exes did, like that would get brought up a lot, and how like, how could I treat her the same way these other guys did? And everything would just like blow up into these huge conflicts where I was like, whoa, I was just saying like, hey, I want to get to bed like a little bit earlier tonight, right? Like it wasn't anything that serious, but it was just a kind of get to know you phase. It would just escalate to this thing, you know? And, you know, with my therapist, we strategized and we had the therapy conversation. I was like, hey, you know, I feel like every time we have a conflict, it switches and it becomes me taking care of you and your issues and your problems. And that was another conflict where she freaked out and I take care of her issues and her problems. And that was the thing that ultimately ended it. But that was something that took some time to really uncover, where I was like, I don't want to be in a relationship where this is where it goes.
Right. And I think that's the value of those, I don't want to say shorter term relationships because you didn't know at the time that it was going to be shorter term, but having that ability of, yeah, we're learning about each other. We're getting more information every time we spend together and lets you know, no, this is not the path. This is not the long-term thing. This is going to be really hard if we do years of this together, and lets you know that unfortunately you needed to be back on the apps and starting from square one again.
Yeah, getting back on the apps was like it's like, oh my God, I got to start from the beginning. I got to tell the same freaking stories over again. I got to like go to the same place. Cause I don't know, I live in like a part of Boulder that's like not that big. So I would go to the same places. I'd have the same date 100 times, you know, like I know you live in LA, but so you have a lot more diversity. In Boulder, it's like, there's not that many options.
It is diversity, but I think there's this stereotype of we either have coffee or go on a hike. Like those were the first date options. Yeah, we had a lot of different places to go, but it still felt like Groundhog's Day. And I think that probably is part of the reason why some people stay in those shorter term relationships a little bit longer, because it feels, again, like a defeat or just really heavy to, oh, I've got to start from square one again.
For sure. Yeah, I think that kept me in a couple ones, especially, again, during the pandemic. I was like, oh my God, what if I don't meet anybody? Like, it would be nice to have somebody. You know, my work is very solitary. So it was like, it was like a lot of companionship need. And some of my friends took COVID very seriously. So I wasn't seeing them at all.
Right.
So I had lost a lot of community at that same time.
Yeah. I had so I was on the apps, like I said, and found someone that I was really interested in. He did I really enjoyed this. I want to see you next time. And texted me the next day. And I was emailing friends and I was like, oh, well, I'll probably never see this guy again. And so I almost had to deal with some of the traumas of the dating experience because I was really freaked out that I wouldn't see him again after about date 3 or 4 or 5, when I thought things were really going well. And I was super excited to continue with him. I was convinced again that, he was going to fall off the face of the earth. So it was like every single milestone, I was just prepared for the relationship to go up in flames or to be ghosted.
Really?
Yes.
When did that shift? I mean, when was there like, and they were like, well, okay, wow, we're really doing this.
So again, a conversation with my therapist. And
listeners, if you're dating, get a therapist.
They're really really helpful.
Work with her.
But we were talking, and she finally said, I think it would be helpful to let him know that you're scared. And you don't have to necessarily go into the details. But if you're together, just say, I'm feeling scared, or this process is scary to me right now, so that you're not holding that all by yourself. Because what she was noticing that I wasn't was when I was in these moments, I was then separating from him because I was super terrified. I was withdrawing. And then it was, I'm probably going to create a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I think the first 2 times that I said I was scared, after that, it was just almost smooth sailing for me. I didn't have that concern anymore.
Yeah. And it's something I work with a lot with my clients is it's like sometimes you say stuff just for you. Like the other person might not receive it at all or might not even know what to do with it. But at least, like you said, that secret is out there and it loses a lot of power once it's in the space, you know?
Right. And just for that, like I recently, just this week, had a conversation with my partner and said something about like, yeah, I was super scared. And he's like, I didn't know that. Well, I told you. And he's like, yeah, I don't remember that at all. So you're absolutely right. It didn't impact him in the moment, but it was super powerful for me.
Right. Right. And you're like, I definitely told you because I had like multiple therapy sessions about it. I planned it out. I had like my little note cards and my reference sheet. Like this 100% happened.
It totally did. You're absolutely right. So yeah, it was a big buildup. And the first time I told him I loved him, he didn't respond. Well, he did respond. He just didn't say it back. Mm-hmm. But he said something along the lines of, I appreciate hearing that or something, or it's nice to hear that. And yep. Text flurries with friends of like, I screwed it up. We're done. I know it. He's going to, end this. And just a lot of in my head, a lot of journaling, a lot of talking to friends and therapists and trying to just push through my freakouts.
For sure. Yeah. So where are things with him now? And I'm just reflecting, it's like, maybe this could be our next episode is like being in a relationship in your 30s.
Oh gosh.
Right? Like it just continues. But I'm curious what it's like now.
Yeah, we have been together almost 8 months and moved in together last month. So for me, it feels very much like a success story so far. Again, I'd been off and on dating, off and on rejecting the idea of dating or desperately wanting it for over 10 years. And it's exciting to be in a long-term relationship now. And there are a lot of different challenges that we're navigating.
Yeah. What's the move-in like? That's the next phase, right?
Yes. And I moved into his place for a number of different reasons, which wasn't our ideal. We would have rather had a neutral like space that the both of us were moving into. But it's been a journey in trying to get my sense of space and identity in that. And I realized recently that I haven't given myself the opportunity to adjust to, I am not a single person anymore. I am not a single person, or I'm not a person in a relationship living on my own. I'm not living in the same apartment complex or community of LA that I was before. I took 1 day off for the move, of 1 day off from work, and then was just back right at it. So I think there were a lot of changes that I haven't yet given myself the space to incorporate or adjust. But on the whole, I'm really excited about having someone to come home to and having, knowing that there are so many new things that we're going to be encountering together.
Yeah, for sure. Right. Because the move-in phase, and that's where I'm at with Carolyn, is she officially moved in March, but she'd been kind of living here since January or February,
right.
But yeah, it really moves from, for me, like dating to family in a way, mm-hmm. right? Where, like you said, the unit goes from 1 to 2. Mm-hmm. There's, we see each other all the time now. So there's a lot more of that downtime. It's not like, hey, let's go out and do a fun thing. It's like, we're just together. Mm-hmm. And similarly, she moved into my place and she's so great because I'm incredibly neurotic and I have like the ways I do things and I like doing things and I've optimized a lot of my place. And it's just like, it was very much my space. So my work was making a lot of room for her, which looks like, practical things, which in some ways is easier, like building her shelves and reorganizing the closet and making sure she has dressers and all that stuff, right? I'm handy, so I like doing that. But emotionally is where I'm at right now, mm-hmm. is like, being like, okay, always consider somebody else as well. Or allowing her to give to me. I'm not very good at receiving. So it's
Right.
like, okay, how do I actually receive from the person? How do I not be in that nice guy role that can creep up where I am like the leader initiator of everything, right? I guess sometimes feel responsible for her happiness, whereas she's just cool. She's just totally fine, just hanging out, right? It's like, it's her house,
Right.
But to me, it's like, oh, we're on a date every single day and it's at my house every single day.
Right.
So I'm trying to kind of disconnect from that.
Well, and there's some pressures like you're talking about of how do we fill the time? One of the things that I noticed that was different too, I talked to a friend months prior to the move-in, and said there was an encounter where I had texted my boyfriend, Andrew, and didn't hear back from him. And it ended up our phones just were funky that day. And so he was sending me messages and I wasn't receiving them. And so when we finally saw each other at the end of the day, he was like, I was terrified that something had happened to you today. And when I was telling my friend, she goes, you all text that often during the day? And I was like, yeah, because we don't live together. So now we can go days without texting. And it's a small shift, but it's just I know that I'm going to see him at the end of the day. And before I didn't, there would be days that we wouldn't spend together.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I don't text her at all. I mean, I just don't, because she lives here now. So there's a lot more of that. I've noticed, I'm curious if this is similar for you. I've noticed that my sense of community has grown exponentially with her. I don't know if it's a gender thing, like people trust coupled men more than single dudes, maybe.
Oh.
But like, we both like hosting and entertaining, and we both really show up and really bond over that. But it seems like part of my community has really like coalesced around us as a couple, which is really meaningful. Like, I feel like we talked in the beginning of the episode of like that next phase. I feel like I've joined my friends and my community in that next phase, right? Of being in a long-term relationship. And it feels nice, quite frankly,
Right. And I think there is something that feels a bit different about being in a relationship like that, is that there's, it's not just you reporting on you, but people are asking about your partner, or people are expecting that maybe the two of you are showing up. And so they're not even inviting her. It's just an understood, if I'm inviting you, she's going to be coming along. So yeah, it is a bit of a different experience.
Yeah, I think this is cool. We kind of have broken down our texting habits. We complement each other very well. So like, I am all about logistics, and I hate chatting over text message. Hate it. Cannot stand like, hey, how's it going? How's your day? Just thinking about it. It's like, I do not do that at all. And she's the opposite. She loves just chatting on her phone. So what I tell with her is that she's like the diplomat, right? She's like out there, learning about my friends. Like, she's texting my friends because they like chatting. And I'm like, oh, wow, I didn't know like Sam was into this, right? Like, she's getting more information about my friends that I never even knew.
Yeah.
And then I'm in that role of setting up like the hangouts and the barbecues and the board game nights and all that kind of stuff. So we actually complement each other well. And it's been nice because I don't bond with people that way.
Which is, again, so interesting. You're a therapist. You'd think that would be your go-to.
Not at all. No. I get paid to do that.
Exactly. Turn it off at the end of the day.
Yeah. At the end of the day, I just want to hang out. So this episode's gotten really fast. We do have to wrap up here. Christina, maybe we can have you on in another couple months and we can both update listeners about where we're at, after being moved in together with our partners. But as we're wrapping up here, can you tell people a little bit about, where they can find you online, what kind of services you offer?
Sure. I'm, again, based in Los Angeles in the Los Feliz area of East LA, and I am online at www.cdixoncounseling.com. Also have Instagram and Facebook where I'm posting just helpful quotes and tips along the way.
That's great. And you offer individual? Do you run any groups? What are you doing right
individual, now? And I have a new group starting on Wednesday nights for people just to learn more about communication styles, learn more about themselves, their relationships with others. And individual counseling, and specialize a lot with perfectionists and people who are caretakers and taking care of other people's feelings, and learning how to focus on themselves.
Yeah, there's a lot of us out there. So
yes.
you're doing some great work.
Absolutely.
So thanks again for joining us on this episode of From the Ashes. If you're a listener, please share this with someone who you think might be helpful. Share some funny stories. If anyone's dating in their 30s, they to know that they're not alone. Give us some 5-star reviews. We're trying to boost up our iTunes reviews right now. And then sharing it across all your social media channels really helps us to get the message out. So thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next week on another episode.
You are listening to From the Ashes with Mark Azoulay. To reach the show today, please call 1-888-346-9141. That's 1-888-346-9141. Or send an email to podcast@mark-azoulay.com. Now, back to From the Ashes.